And we, of course, always want your conversation on the Game Time text line, 512-834-1027. That's 512-834-1027. We'll get into that NBA and the NFL parallel, which I think is intriguing, coming out of the NBA championship and the finals. But let me mention real quick, Jack, if you're a fan of Texas State, eat 'em up Cats. Good update yesterday, at least in some news. The Pac-12, the new Pac-12, right? They're trying to cobble this thing together. Pretty much the Mountain West revisited, but it is a good opportunity for Texas State. Right down 35 there in San Marcos. The Pac-12 has struck a deal with CBS Media to be the anchor of its new media rights package. That's a significant situation. You know, because they kind of put together a preliminary blueprint of what this new 8-team conference, 9 if you include Gonzaga in basketball, what that's going to look like. CBS came back to the Pac-12 and said, okay, here's what we can, what that's worth to us. And it sounds like the two have struck a deal. Well, that paves the way for the long-awaited addition of the 9th school. Now that that CBS has said, okay, we'll sign on to that, and here's how much money we'll give the conference on an annual basis, the Pac-12 can now officially engage Texas State. And, the official invite, the long-discussed courtship over expansion, the formal invite would then guarantee, and what Texas State's going to want from that negotiation is a full media rights share to start with. They want it all to begin. Because sometimes, Jack, they'll stair-step programs into a conference, right, where they get a quarter share the first year and then a half share the next year, and then they work their way to a full media rights share. Texas State doesn't want any part of that. They want the full upfront because they're the one they're an important piece to this whole thing. You have to think with CBS and knowing they're getting a Boise State with a brand, they're getting a Gonzaga, and they want to be in the state of Texas. The CBS does, playing football games in the second most populous state in the country. And obviously the growth potential of a Texas State over a long-term media rights deal. So now that the CBS deal's done, Texas State can, because they want to get this done this week, because they want to notify the Sun Belt Conference, a conference they've been in for the last 11 or 12 years, that they are going to get out. And they need to give that official notification before July 1st. They're after July 1, their exit fee from the Sun Belt will double, so they need to get that done. So this could be a really, really busy week. And as we've talked about before, big picture for Texas State elevates that school's profile on a national stage. More showcase matchups down in San Marcos with the likes of Boise State, Washington State, Oregon State in football, basketball home and homes with Gonzaga, San Diego State, and those kind of programs. Baseball program would get a boost from playing those West Coast schools. But more importantly, it would be a dramatic increase in their annual conference media rights revenue. It is anticipated that the new media deal we just told you about, anchored by CBS, would at least double, possibly triple, maybe quadruple what they're receiving from the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt, they're getting $2 million annually. There are some estimates that over the course of the new media rights deal and being in the Pac-12, they could get up to about $10 million annually, which, gosh, that's quadrupling your money. It's more than quadrupling your money. And at a time when teams and programs are clawing for any financial help they can get, this is a significant, upgrade. And as we've said, the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, when Texas State makes this official, and I believe they will become the 9th team of the 13 FBS schools in Texas to change their conference affiliation in the past 5 years. You could name the only 4 that have not, correct?
The only 4 schools that have not changed conference in the last 5 years, is that what you said? Baylor,
Baylor,
Tech,
TCU, and Tech, and then A&M.
A&M. Oh.
A&M's been a minute. They kind of started all this way back in 2011 when they jumped out of the Big 12 into the SEC. But here we are. So that good. I think it's a great thing for Texas State. I've been told that when and if it's official, we will have Don Coryell on the show, and the president will come on and talk about why. But I think that's a significant move. And I know a lot of listeners out there attended Texas State, went there maybe back when it was Southwest Texas State. Their climb into the bigger picture, the bigger stratosphere of college athletics is not going unnoticed right now, because they might be jumping into the newly formed Pac-12, which I think is cool. Hey, we'll get back to the Longhorns coming up bottom of the hour, talk about those baseball editions. But I did want to mention, we just started the show talking about the league and the NBA with a 7th consecutive new champion, right? Oklahoma's Game 7 win over Indiana. TV ratings really strong, which a lot of times on a Game 7, who didn't tune into that game on a Sunday night? Wasn't much else on, but same time, then Tyrese Halliburton gets hurt, and the Pacers are winning by halftime. And it was compelling, and the ratings were real good. The ratings were down, obviously, for the finals itself. But look at the long-term vision. We before this series started, we reminded everybody and took you back to 2011 when the then NBA Commissioner David Stern locked out the players. Said, we got to get this thing fixed. and really stood on a long-term vision for the league and locked the players out in the NBA.
And we got Linsanity.
Well, yeah, well, exactly, Jeremy
great.
Lin. Yeah, but it forced a reshaping. And a quick reminder that David Stern was the commissioner for 4 decades. 4.5 decades before he handed it off to Adam Silver. And over the 4 decades from when he took over in the early 80s until that lockout, we told you a grand total of 8 franchises had won the 40 championships. So you got 40 titles, 8 teams won them all.
Yeah, most of them Boston and L.A.
Boston, L.A., the Spurs were heavy in that. But, and the Bulls won 6 of them with Michael Jordan. I mean, that's not, to me, that's not healthy for a league. When 8 teams are dominating for 40 years, it's a dynasty league, which that's what I grew up with. I mean, that was what you just expected it. There's been one in the last 15 years, and that's Golden State. They had their run. But at the same time, that was done. They were built organically. They were built through the draft, and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, and you pick up Andre Iguodala and make your moves, and Draymond Green in the second round.
We had the same finals for 4 years in a row.
Yeah, but those were more organically built teams, which is what the 2011 lockout was about. It was, if you go back to David Stern saying, we have to create a structure that ensures that 30 teams, if well managed, have an opportunity to both compete and make profit. And, of course, that lockout cost them 16 games, but it also gained a collective bargaining agreement that put the league on a path to where it is today. And as David Stern's successor and now current NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said recently, I understand that dynasties are something that fans will get behind. At the same time, what you hear from fans is they want those teams to be created the right way, so people aren't interested in seeing teams buy championships, so to speak. But the other thing that Silver doesn't mention there, Jack, that is important, and as I say, I think it's one of the strengths of the current NFL. Parity. Like, what you want is that of your franchises, the fan bases during an offseason like now have hope.
Yeah.
Like think about it this way. Merit-based success, the NFL, one of its superpowers is that if your organization is well run, if you have good leadership at the top, because look, I grew up in a time in the NFL, Jack, where dynasties were the way. If you go back to before pre-mid-90s, when the collective bargaining agreement and the salary cap came in the NFL, it was similar. Like you had the Steelers and the Cowboys who dominated the 70s. You had the Redskins and the 49ers who dominated the 80s. The Cowboys of the early 90s. But starting in the mid-90s, that went away because just like the NBA did in 2011, the NFL began the free agency era. It started with something called Plan B free agency that led to outright free agency. Because, Jack, back in the 70s, back to the Lombardi Packers, into the 70s and 80s, you could stockpile good players for a long time and they couldn't go anywhere. Right? Once they were drafted, they were yours, and there was no free agency. Players couldn't leave. They stayed on those teams, and the players finally said, we need some rights on here. We need to be able to have some movement. And, the salary cap was built and created in the NFL to make sure with free agency. Because look at the NFL, right? You had teams like Green Bay in a tiny market, and then you had 2 in New York and Chicago. You had to create parity. If you were going to have free agency and open movement of players, then there had to be a cap, which they all agreed to. That has created this superpower of the NFL, in my opinion, which is, think about it right now in the NFL. It's June the 24th. Training camp starting a month. How many teams in the NFL right now, fan bases, sit here and think, yeah, we're going to be terrible?
I thought you were going the other way with it.
No, we're going to be terrible. We'll start with that. Maybe 3?
Yeah, honestly.
Because New Orleans knows they're in for a rough year. And they've kind of built that with the way they've handled their cap and kind of went out and thought David Carr might have been the answer, and they kept putting Band-Aids on a bad cap situation. Maybe in
the Saints and the Browns for sure.
Cleveland's in a bad way because they're bad run, but this is what parity does.
Yeah.
Because look, for a long time we could just say Washington, they're not going to be good. Daniel Snyder's a terrible owner. Al Davis before he passed away with the Raiders, and then Mark, his successor, his son. If you're run by a bad owner, you're not going to win in the NFL. You're just not. Ask the Cowboys, right? Since free agency and salary cap have come online in 1994-95, the Cowboys haven't sniffed the Super Bowl. And that goes directly to the top. That goes directly to leadership. And that's what the NFL's created. And like when I say that, of the 32 markets, maybe 3 or 4 like, man, this is going to be a terrible year. There are probably 25 to 28 that think, man, we could go into the playoffs.
Yeah, and
like you even hear optimism in places like New England with Mike Vrabel, and Tennessee, where they drafted Cam Ward, and who knows? I mean, because what we've seen in recent years in the NFL, there are examples of the Texans going from terrible to real good pretty quick with DeMeco Ryans and C.J. Stroud. Last year, Jalen Daniels and and Dan Quinn in Washington. It can turn quickly. So teams, watch the draft. That's why they watch the draft. That's why they watch free agency. What are we doing? What's our roster going to look like? When I say superpower of the NFL, that's one of them, is that the teams and their fan base pays attention to what's happening all offseason because they know a couple of moves here and there. Even the Cowboys, who kind of know deep down it's not going to work. I like the George Pickens move. I like the defensive draft picks they've made.
We're not Cowboys fans, and we like their offseason.
Yeah.
That's fair to say.
But there's just not – it's bad for a league when more than half the teams think, oh, man, we suck.
Yeah.
We suck. And the NBA was in that. It was dominated at the top by a handful of teams, but there were way too many teams that knew they had no chance.
Every year there are like 4 teams that you think could make the finals.
Yeah.
And for years before that, everybody kind of knew it was Golden State and Cleveland. Rockets gave them a couple runs. Raptors had good teams, but they knew they were never going to beat LeBron. And now, I think, you look at the East, you look at the West, it feels pretty wide open. But even
in your growing up age, because you're half my age, though I will say it again, the Cleveland team, the second one that LeBron played on, was an organically built team for the most part. And that's what the 2011 CBA was. With smart development, a long-term vision, a good plan, you can build a championship roster. And what have we seen in the last 7 years? We're like the likes of Toronto and the Bucks and the Nuggets and now the Thunder have all won championships.
Everyone gets a piece, yeah.
Well, and the fan bases in the other markets can say, we can do that too. We can do that. And that was for a long time not the case in the NBA. It was all about L.A. and the coast and the big markets. And
super teams.
You get a super team, you're going to be good forever, and it won't be torn apart. But that's the beauty of the NFL. The NFL knows they only want you to be good in short bursts. The league is built to be good in short windows, and that's why if you don't, as an organization, maximize that window and don't cash one in, you're going to have to retool because the salary cap catches up to you, and you got to get rid of free agency. They pilfer off your good coaches and your good players, and the draft is built how it is. You don't add significant pieces, and the NBA is getting more and more like that. And I'll give David Stern a lot of credit. I know the ratings are down and all these things, but I see a league that is heading in a good direction, where more teams hit this offseason and they want to watch the draft tomorrow night. They want to see the moves their organization makes. And maybe that started over the weekend with Kevin Durant landing in Houston. Because listen to some of the conversation from the national talking heads yesterday that, well, maybe the Rockets can be that team that becomes Oklahoma City or Boston or whoever of next year. Here's Nick Wright of Fox Sports talking about, hey, man, he thinks maybe the Rockets are a team to watch for. They were the 2 seed in the West last year anyhow, by the way, a young, emerging core. But now they add Kevin Durant and about 26 points a game.
I think I'll pick them to win the West.
Really?
I think they have a great blend of what we've seen works right now in the NBA, which is, you talked about the defense, bang. High-level coaching, no doubt about it. Depth, and a guy who can get you a guaranteed 25 plus, which Kevin Durant still is. Like, there's no question about it.
All right, and that's true. Kevin Durant still is, and it's what Houston didn't have last year. And to acquire Kevin Durant without giving up any of their significant core pieces that you've told us about, Jack. So I will give you the props, by the way, my friend Jack Farrell, because you said the same thing yesterday, echoing that you think the Rockets with Kevin Durant, if they can make sure he's healthy come playoff time, can be that gets them over the hump, and a much more parity-driven league where, again, as we sit here on June 24th, a lot of teams in the NBA feel like they can make the playoffs with some good moves and a good draft tomorrow night, and then once you get in the tournament, like the Pacers just did, anything can happen, and that's good for the health of your league.
And as more teams age out, these younger teams get to come in and become the new era of basketball. And I think Houston has done a great job drafting. Ironically, the one pick they missed on was the highest pick that they had during this whole rebuild, Jalen Green at 2. But otherwise, they've drafted great in the teens, just like Oklahoma City has. Alperen Şengün was the number 16 pick, I want to say, that they actually got that pick in a trade with Oklahoma City. But I think parity is much better for the league, maybe for me personally.
Well,
and I think that's where some of this player empowerment does come in, because guys are now saying, oh, well, if I don't think I can win a title here, trade me to somewhere where I can.
Well, and look, I mean, as we just saw with the Boston Celtics, because we were talking about dynastic Celtics after last year, but
they've been gifted a transition window.
Correct, but you're one locker room dispute, you're one popped Achilles from sliding down.
Exactly.
And now you're out. You lose Jason Tatum or you lose, think about the teams that were in the finals a year ago, the Celtics and the Mavericks. Well, where are they now?
Bad outlooks. Well,
and that's how the NFL has been. How many times do we have a team in the Super Bowl that doesn't make the playoffs the next year?
Yeah, there's an old Jeff Ward promo that we had running for a while where he says, when the window shuts, it shuts hard.
Yeah, well, that's how the NFL's built, y'all.
Yeah.
That's by design. It's also by design, and it's why for 30 years I've been beating the drum of Jerry Jones, and I don't have to walk to Dallas. If you're run poorly at the top, you're not going to win in that league.
Yeah.
You might win some divisions, you might win some, and go 10 wins, but you're not winning the Super Bowl in that league. It's built to reward the shrewd, the wise, the smart, the Howie Rosemans of the world, the Brett Veaches in Kansas City. Those are the teams they're consistently going to be good. They understand how the windows work, and they're going to reopen their windows. And yes, they're going to draft a Patrick Mahomes, and that's going to change the equation. But that's what the league is. And again, when I say that's one of its superpowers, it really is. We can sit here on June 24th, and there's maybe 3 or 4 teams that are dreading what this year is going to look like. Like, again, you even have optimistic fans in New England who are coming off a terrible year.
And even if
the Giants and Jets are somewhat excited. And again, injuries will set in and teams will get bad. That's the way the NFL works. But at least in June and July and August, man, we're excited. We can be in the mix here.
Even teams that don't necessarily think they have playoff aspirations or Super Bowl aspirations have reasons for optimism.
They have a young quarterback.
Yeah, like look at the top of the draft. Look at Tennessee. Look at New England, as you said. The Jets, maybe not much, but they don't have Aaron Rodgers on their team.
Well,
anymore.
They're going to sell Justin Fields and Aaron Glenn's new vision, right? But and in that division, who knows? But that's the way the NFL's been built. And it leads to its popularity. I'm not saying the NBA can ever be as popular as the NFL.
Oh, no,
Nothing can.
I'm the NBA guy, and it won't.
But I do think this is healthier than what I lived with for the first 40 years of my life. That's the same teams every year.
Just waiting for the next Lakers run.
And now we're 7 in a row. And again, even Golden State was a dynasty in the run of the last 15, but that was a team that was drafted and developed by great leadership.
And they got another one later, well after the dynasty had ended.
So I think it's a healthy thing. We'll take your thoughts. 512-834-1027. One place there's not parity, college football. How many teams can actually win the national championship this year?
Yeah,
There's a lot more teams.
Why we like bowl games.
A lot more teams, too,
That's why we like bowl games. You can end the season on a good note.